Have you ever watched a crow and felt, for just a moment, like it was watching you back? Not glancing. Watching. Deliberately. With something that looks uncomfortably like recognition. It is early morning. Your feeder is up. A single American crow, Corvus brachyrhynchos, lands on the fence post at the edge of your yard. It tilts its head. You are inside, behind glass. You have not moved. And yet it is looking directly at where you are standing. It caws once. Then flies off. You have probably told yourself it was coincidence. Or that crows just look alert. Or that you are projecting something onto a bird. But here is the thing. The crow may actually remember your face. It may have remembered it for years. And the way it is doing that, the mechanism inside that small, dark skull, involves a brain structure that should not, by any account scientists currently have, be capable of producing anything like what crows actually do. This is not something that makes it into casual conversation. It is not hidden, exactly, the research is published, peer-reviewed, cited. But nobody asks the question, which means nobody lands on the answer. And the answer is one of the strangest things documented in modern animal cognition. The crow at your feeder is not just a clever bird. It is a creature running a form of memory that researchers at the University of Cambridge, the University of Washington, and the University of Tübingen have spent decades trying to fully characterize, and cannot. Not completely. The behavior is confirmed. The architecture that produces it remains, in significant ways, open. Welcome to this channel. If you are interested in bird behavior that science has documented but not fully explained, subscribe, there is a lot more of this. And stay to the end, because I want to tell you about something crows are doing right now that involves a sense you do not have and cannot simulate. That part is genuinely strange in a way that is hard to prepare for. Most people, if asked what crows remember, would say something like, they remember where they hid food, and they remember people who bothered them. Which is true. But it is like saying the ocean is wet. Technically accurate. Enormously incomplete. Start with faces. A 5-year study at the University of Washington, led by Professor John Marsluff, one of the foremost researchers in Corvid intelligence, had researchers wear a specific mask while trapping, banding, and releasing wild crows on and around the Seattle campus. A caveman mask, specifically. Once the crows were released, researchers simply walked around wearing various masks. The crows who had been trapped mobbed and scolded the caveman mask aggressively. They ignored other masks entirely. That is already interesting. But then something else happened. Young crows, birds that had never been trapped, never been handled, never encountered the original researchers, also began scolding the dangerous mask. They had learned it from their parents. The memory had been transmitted socially. A specific human face, encoded in one generation, had been passed to the next. What makes this genuinely strange is this: researchers still do not know the upper boundary of how long this transmitted memory persists, or how many generations it can travel through before it degrades. The original study documented 5 years. Anecdotal field evidence and related observations suggest facial grudges in wild crow populations may endure for something closer to 17 years. What the mechanism of that transmission looks like at the neural level, how exactly one crow conveys to another that a particular configuration of a face is dangerous, is not understood. Now, food caching. This is where it gets harder to process. Most people assume that when crows hide food, they are doing something roughly like putting something in a drawer. You know where the drawer is, you open it later. Simple location memory. Spatial recall. What Professor Nicola Clayton at the University of Cambridge documented, first in scrub jays, corvid relatives of crows, in a landmark 1998 paper published in Nature, is something categorically different. These birds are not just remembering where. They are remembering what they cached, where they cached it, and when, how long ago, because those three pieces of information together determine which caches are still worth retrieving. Clayton's jays had cached two types of food: peanuts, which last, and crickets, which rot. When allowed to retrieve caches, the birds went for the crickets first, but only when the interval was short enough that the crickets were still fresh. When too much time had passed, they went for the peanuts. They were tracking the passage of time against the perishability of specific food items at specific locations. This is what scientists call episodic-like memory. The ability to mentally revisit a specific past event, not just know a fact, but recall an experience with contextual detail. It was considered, for most of scientific history, to be a uniquely human cognitive capacity. What makes this genuinely strange is this: whether what crows and jays are doing constitutes true episodic memory, whether there is subjective experience involved, whether the bird is in some sense mentally traveling back in time, cannot currently be determined. The behavior is episodic-like. Whether it is episodic, in the way that you remember your first day of school, is a question researchers at Cambridge and the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne published a computational model in 2023 specifically trying to address. The model works. The question of what is actually happening inside the bird remains open. Now hold this thought, because this is where the numbers become important. The Clark's nutcracker, Nucifraga columbiana, is a corvid relative of crows found in the mountain ranges of western North America. Every autumn, a single nutcracker harvests somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 pine seeds. It buries them in caches of 2 to 4 seeds, spread across a 15-mile area. Then it finds them 9 months later, under snow. 20,000 separate locations. Remembered for 9 months. Researchers at the University of New Hampshire documented this. The hippocampus, the brain region associated with spatial memory, physically enlarges in nutcrackers during caching season and then contracts again as caches are retrieved. The brain is literally building and then dismantling its own memory infrastructure in real time. 20,000 locations. Let that sit for a moment. Because your brain, reading that, probably cannot fully hold it. And the nutcracker is not struggling. What makes this genuinely strange is this: crows themselves, urban American crows, the ones at your feeder, are estimated by researchers to maintain a working memory of thousands of individual locations, faces, social relationships, and past interactions simultaneously. The exact capacity has not been established. We do not have a ceiling yet. And then there is the brain. This is the part that should not work. Everything described above, the facial recognition, the episodic-like recall, the spatial memory across thousands of locations, the social transmission of memories across generations, requires, in mammals, a structure called the prefrontal cortex. It is the region that sits at the front of the brain and is responsible for executive function, decision-making, working memory, and the complex integration of past experience into present behavior. Crows do not have a prefrontal cortex. They do not have a neocortex at all. Birds and mammals last shared a common ancestor roughly 320 million years ago. The mammalian brain and the avian brain took completely separate evolutionary paths. Where mammals developed a layered cortex, birds developed what researchers at the University of Tübingen call the nidopallium caudolateral, or NCL, a densely packed nuclear structure sitting toward the middle of the brain, modulated by dopamine, connected to every sensory system, and functioning, in behavioral terms, like a prefrontal cortex. Andreas Nieder's lab at Tübingen implanted microelectrodes in crows and recorded the neuronal activity of the NCL while birds performed cognitive tasks. The firing patterns of neurons in the crow NCL matched the firing patterns of primate prefrontal cortex neurons performing the same tasks. Same outputs. Completely different architecture. Different evolutionary origin. Separated by 300 million years of divergent history. What makes this genuinely strange is this: the implications of this are not fully understood. If two radically different brain structures, one layered, one nuclear, one mammalian, one avian, can produce the same cognitive output, then the scientific assumption that intelligence requires specific architecture may be wrong. Or incomplete. Or measuring the wrong thing. Nieder's own papers describe the structural differences between the NCL and the mammalian neocortex as something whose implications remain unclear. That is not modesty. That is the current state of the science. Now, the thing I promised you at the beginning. Crows, along with many other corvids, are believed to use something researchers call magnetic sensing, a sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field embedded in their navigation system. This is not vision. It is not smell. It is not sound. It is a perceptual channel that has no human analog. You cannot simulate it, because you have never had access to it. And here is what that means for memory. When a crow caches food and later retrieves it, it is not just using visual landmarks the way you would. It is, according to current evidence, integrating magnetic field data into its spatial memory, layering a sense you do not have onto a memory system that already outperforms anything a human can do unaided. What the subjective experience of that is like, what it is to be a crow, holding 20,000 locations organized partly by a magnetic map of the ground beneath you, is not a question science can currently answer. It may not be a question science can currently ask in a way that produces a testable hypothesis. So, early morning. The crow on the fence post. It is looking at where you are standing. You started this wondering whether that means something. You know more now. You know about the face memory and the 5-year study and the 17-year anecdotes. You know about episodic-like recall and the what-where-when structure of its cache memory. You know that its brain has no cortex and yet produces cognitive outputs that match a primate's. You know it may be perceiving a layer of the physical world that you are entirely blind to. The question you started with, does it recognize me? Has not been fully answered. Because the deeper question underneath it, what is it doing when it recognizes something? What is it like to be a crow remembering? Is a question that researchers at some of the most respected universities in the world are actively sitting with. The crow flies away. You are standing in a familiar yard. The feeder is the same. The bird is the same. The question just got bigger. Tell me about the strangest thing you have ever seen a crow, or any corvid, do that you still cannot explain. I read every one of these.